Tara. It's great to be here.
I'm hoping you can get us started by tell our audience who you are, what work you do, what education you have maybe related to divorce and finances, and what work you do with people who are going through a divorce.
Yeah, loaded question there, Tara.
Well, it is your job, Rachel.
Yeah, true. So I partner with both individuals and small businesses in working through their financial goals. So we talk through what's most important to them. We figure out where they are today, define that, talk through where they're working towards, what goals that they have, figure out, can we get there? How can we get there? Staying on track over time. And so that translates into divorce as well. At the end of 2020, you asked what education I have in this area with divorce, and I chose to really hone in my practice and focus my education on divorce. So at the end of 2020, there was a pandemic going on.
Still. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went and got my certified divorce financial analyst title. And so I am a CDFA. And that's been almost 3 years now. I did go through a divorce myself a handful of years prior to that. So taking what I experienced, knowing what I know in my field, and then carrying that over through divorce it's just elevated in so many different areas, right? Because we have these goals that we thought were important to us, and then everything changes. Everything gets flipped upside down. And so I chose to change my practice a little bit. I mean, I still work with individuals that aren't going through a divorce and small businesses and whatnot, but that soft spot where my heart lies has really been focusing on this divorce clientele.
Yeah. And that makes sense that you need somebody that's specifically focused on finances when you're going through your divorce, because finances are one of the biggest stressors in divorce. I know that that was one of the biggest things for me. On one of our last podcasts, Paul, a mediator, talked about how in mediation, that's one of the things that we go through. So finances are important. And I wanted to get you on here to talk with us a little bit about some ideas for, setting the foundation for yourself. If you're going through a divorce, what areas to look at, what do you need to focus on? So could you give us a rundown of what categories of finances individuals who are going through a divorce should be focused on?
Absolutely. And you said one of the biggest triggers or one of the biggest hurdles to get through is talking through that finance. So I would say, number one, give yourself a clean slate, give yourself some grace, give yourself a safe space to look through things, because it's not always the easiest to look at. It's not always the easiest to talk through, not only by yourself, but with other people as well. And so you are laying it all out there, and that's okay. That's a good thing. So some of those things that we really want to focus in on, and that you can start taking control of, even if it's just through awareness, is cash flow. So figuring out what you have coming in and figuring out what you have going out, even though those numbers may change, if you're in the process of going through a divorce and you're not quite sure what lies ahead, that's okay. That's okay to not know those things, but to really start tracking what is coming in, what is going out. And if you don't know, that's okay. Start taking it one day at a time to say, oh, what did I have to pay money for today? What bills came due today? How much was my gas when I filled up the car today? How much was the grocery bill? And just start writing it down. That can be so helpful to have this awareness. Then it's less of a daunting task if that's something new for you. And if it's not something new for you, that's okay too. But do start writing those things down. And I know there are a lot of apps that will track that for you as well. And I don't think they're innately bad, but when you're first starting, I think the power of a pad of paper and a pencil or a pen, and you physically writing things down, can be monumental. Can just be so helpful to do those things. So number one, I would start there, because that is something you can do. I guess that's it. If you haven't made any decisions on finance, that is something you can do. And if you need an accountability partner, talk to a friend about it, a family member, or reach out to a financial advisor that can start talking through those things with you as well. That's a lot of what I do with clients when they're still going through a divorce, even though we're not ready to start managing assets and doing things like that. We are talking about what's important to you. Well, day-to-day cash flow is pretty important. So let's start getting a handle on that. Let's talk through it. How did you feel about that? Things like that. And so it's just number one, cash flow. And then number two, I know it can be scary or sometimes exciting or whatever it may be. It's going to be different for every person. But start thinking about what your priorities are for you. And whether you have kids or not, it still applies. Your world is changing, and give yourself that space to think about what is most important to you and start putting some visions around that. Put details into that, write that out, talk that out to give you something to be working towards.
I'm just thinking as you're talking about it, how intriguing it is to me about how much emotion is connected with finances and with the money process. Like you're talking about cash flow and then your future goals and where you want to be in your life. And I think even for me, and I'm sure for others, they're thinking about this is numbers, something overlaying, but it sounds like you really understand that money is the flow for, the basics for helping you live and also reaching your goals. And it's super important to have a good, solid foundation of that when you're going for through the divorce and creating the life that you want in the future. So, yeah. So we're focusing on cash flow and your priorities. I think the big categories I think about are retirement and investments. What are those other categories to focus on?
Yeah, so when you're going through the divorce, there will be some type of division of assets, right? And for a lot of people, those big assets are those retirement accounts, whatever those, maybe it's through a workplace or an IRA, something like that. So know that it's going to be different for everybody, depending on what you have, but retirement dollars, equity in a home, money at the bank, those are all different categories, but that's something else you can do as well, and maybe you already have, if you're going through mediation or you're working with an attorney, I know this is something they'll have you do, but to start writing down those assets. What do we have? What do we owe? So assets and liabilities. And something to keep in mind is whether or not those assets were acquired during the marriage or if you acquired them before. So if you have some old inherited account from a great aunt that passed away 20 years ago and it was never commingled or anything like that, just keep that in the back of your mind. You'll want to talk through that. So yes, we have retirement assets. Those have a special tax treatment to them. So we want to keep that in mind. I don't want to go too far in the weeds. It's just in an overview. We want to know that different assets, like I said, a car, a house, a retirement account, a bank account, each dollar in each of those buckets don't always equal each other. So we want to separate out the buckets. And that's where bringing in a professional can help identify what bucket some of those assets go into. So even if you don't know the breakdown, to be able to start writing those down is helpful as well. But that's a big thing to keep in mind. If you're dividing a 401k or a work plan, there are special tax documents that you would need to divide that. If you're dividing an IRA or anything that has investments in it, you're going to want to make sure that it's stated equitably in the decree, things like that. And so if you're trying to do the divorce on your own without professional help, and you have these other assets to be divided, it may be worth bringing in a mediator or something like that, or an attorney. It doesn't have to be because everything's contentious, but know that there are a lot of small details that you're going to want to work through and make sure those are addressed.
Right. So it doesn't have to mean you're not getting along or figuring it out, but a professional could help you figure out actually how much assets you have, how many liabilities, not miss something that's really important to be divided, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. An attorney, mediator, or a financial advisor.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of times I partner up with family law attorneys a lot. And when, because I don't charge hourly for that, something like that, we can take the time. We can take time to go through those individual pieces and help divide them out. And that can be really helpful. But something to keep in mind when you are dividing those assets is that the dollars aren't equal. So if, for example, if you just have an investment account and it has grown significantly, say you bought something for a little bit and it's grown to be a lot, there's a large capital gain in there, meaning if you were to sell it, you're probably going to owe a significant amount in taxes. Where if it was just cash at the bank, you don't. So it's little things like that. You want to make sure that everything's being divided equitably. Okay. And when I say equitably, it doesn't, I want to be conscious on how I say this because it's going to be different for everybody. But a safe default, at least when you're setting expectations for yourself, I would likely say is to think 50-50. That if you go into it saying, I'm taking everything, or you're not getting anything, that's legally probably not how it's going to work out. Yeah. So much of it comes down to setting expectations. And then that's where you want to bring someone in that's going to be able to tell you, does this equal this, or are those different? Yeah. Are you getting this one? Or are you getting this one? Or how do we make them equal or equitable?
I know. I was just thinking about my ex-husband and I, as we went through the process and talking about our cars, and we traded off cars for retirement. Actually, we were able to look at those assets in different ways. And I was also just thinking about how yesterday, more than a year after we've been divorced, we finally refinanced his car and put it in his name because it was on my credit report still. Like, there's stuff that those financial details that I was like, oh, maybe I didn't even think about that his loan on his car that he got in the divorce still has my name on it. It doesn't just automatically come off the loan. It's like, oh, important to figure out. A year later, we figured it out. So it's good to talk.
Yeah, those little things, they
just those little things.
You hope it's done, and then they just keep trailing, and that's okay. You're not alone in that, that's for sure.
Yeah, stuff comes along and it can be fixed.
You can do free credit reports. You can do a free credit report every year. Not that it's the most thrilling report to read.
Right, but it could tell you if there's something you missed that is not supposed to be on there, right?
Highlight some red flags.
Right. Okay. So if I'm going back thinking about the categories you just said, so figure out your current cash flow. What are you actually spending? What's going in? What's going out? What do you need to live? Second, think about your future, your goals, whether you have kids or not, what you want for your next part of your life, because it's going to be separate from what you were doing together. And then 3, look at through what your actual assets and liabilities are. And look at, generally, you're going to be dividing those 50-50. Of course, you'll talk through that in mediation or whatever in your divorce. But look at what's actually there. What are the liabilities of each asset, and how to figure out what, who goes to what, and, all the money you actually have, all the liabilities you actually have. Did I get those all right?
Generally speaking, yeah.
What am I missing? What am I missing?
Everyone's going to be so different that yes, that's a when you're just thinking about setting your own expectations. Yes, I would say you nailed it. Yeah, we want to know day to day. We want to give ourselves the space to think what we're working towards. We do want to know what we have and what we owe, and then what that future cash flow might feel like, and giving ourselves that space to write things down, to lay things out, even if at some point it becomes overwhelming, step away, sleep on it and come back to it, or go for a walk, whatever it is, that's fine. But stick with that. And then, because if you are working with attorneys or you are going through mediation, things like that, divorce can be crazy expensive. Those attorney fees can rack up, and they're just doing their jobs. That it just can be really, really expensive. So the more you can sit with those numbers and look at them, the more you'll be able to have a pragmatic approach when you're just talking through the division of assets. Because I get it. Sometimes you just want to say, but I want I don't know. I want the air fryer. No, I want the fryer. And it's like, oh my gosh, the 15 minutes of attorney time you took talking about the air fryer, or an hour, or whatever it was, you could have just bought 3 of them,
Right. So
I would say do that, and be conscious of, what are kind of those trigger things? What are those things that when I think about, I really do get worked up about? And know that you're not alone, because you can really feel isolated when you're going through this, and you don't have to be. You are the one doing it. Yes, you are the one going through. Whether you're excited about the divorce, or you're terrified about the divorce, or you're heartbroken about the divorce, it's difficult. It's just a difficult thing to go through, no matter what your emotion is around it. So just know I'm doing something really hard, and I'm doing it. And we're moving the ball forward. We're moving the ball forward. You are the one doing the heavy lifting, but you're not alone. So get those people in your corner. Some of them are going to be family and friends. Some of them are going to be professional, and build out someone in each of those. Have someone you can talk to about finance. Have someone with legal knowledge. Have someone you can say, let's go do happy hour.
Right. Yeah.
Have someone to keep accountable. Have someone that you can just, hey, I don't want to talk about anything. Let's just go for a walk. Whatever it is, but build out those people in your corner too, because it's a lot of tasks. It's a lot of things to work through. And you can, and you will, and build in that team to help you do it.
That's good. You need a team. You need a team behind you when you get divorced. It's very true. Very, very true. I was just thinking about
podcast,
yeah.
Podcast.
There's so many ways. I was just thinking about the cost factor, and how you're saying it's important to think through what your triggers are and what your priorities are. And I think that makes sense too when you're talking to your legal advisor or financial advisor or whatever it is, it's important to think about that stuff on your own before you go and connect with them. But there's also sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So that's the time you might want to spend the money, right? You might want to talk to a financial advisor, because you're like, my priority is I come out with a certain amount of money each month, or my priority is that I keep my retirement over keeping this car, or, keeping the radio system in our house is really speaker system. I'm aging myself. In the house is really important to me. What are those priorities before you go, but then using an advisor to help you understand the things you might not know, don't know when it comes to the time to actually do the divorce.
It is more than okay to not know. You said it, a lot of, we don't know. You likely haven't done this before, right? Or if you have, only once or twice, whatever. It's not something you're frequently doing, right? So it's okay not to know. And it's okay not to know what your questions are. It's okay not to know exactly what you're doing. It's okay to reach out and say, I feel overwhelmed and I thought I should call someone.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Talk to someone that knows. Okay, well, what about this? That can ask some identifying questions or something like that to start laying some things out and to break it down. Because like I said, it doesn't always have to be extremely difficult in terms of logistics. Sometimes it is. I don't want to overstate that. It's just a lot of steps.
Yeah.
So to partner with someone that knows more of what those steps are can be really helpful.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about the emotions of it. We're just talking about how emotions and finance go together, but also when you're going through a divorce, like you were saying, whether you're excited about it, whether you asked for it or didn't ask for it, it's emotional transitioning your life. You're transitioning from a 2-person household or a family to an individual with shared parenting time or on your own. And so no matter what, that change is a difficult time, an emotional process. And so having somebody on your side that's not in the emotions of it will help you get through it in a better way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, can see things from a different point of view. I've worked with clients that are going to be walking or have walked away with far more than enough to get by, because for whatever reason, it wasn't their role in the relationship to know what the finances were of the house. They were taking on other tasks for the household. And then I can look at them and run the numbers and say, you're going to be totally fine, and here's why. Let's put some measurable, tangible numbers to that. Or sometimes it's saying, I see why you're concerned. Let's come up with a plan for, let's have a strategy to work through that. I know a lot of times, specifically with parents, keeping the house can be very important. And say, okay, let's look at that. Let's look at what that means. And sometimes it means, okay, we're going to keep it, but we know that in the next 3 to 5 years, we might need to be looking for something else or whatever it is, through this transition for the kids, we need to keep this in place, whatever. And keeping something in your head and being scared of it is always going to lose to talking it out.
Right.
To be able to start laying things out and talking it out and putting together a strategy to make some things happen. It's not always ideal. And then sometimes it's more than ideal. I told a client to go to Italy, go do the trip you want to take, or go buy a new car because it works with it works. Run the numbers and that you go for it. And sometimes it's saying, that's okay, but let's have that expectation. And so instead of saying, oh, I'm just gonna close my eyes, cross my fingers, and hope for the best, and it makes me a little bit upset, so I'm not going to think about it. Oh, that you're going to probably have a lot of queasiness for a good amount of time instead of just, hey, here's what I want to make happen. How do we make that happen?
Yeah.
Maybe we tweak a couple things.
I think this is silly, but I'm thinking about a children's book that my son has. It's called Ruby's Worry, and she follows along with her worry. It's there behind her, and it gets bigger and bigger. And then she has one conversation with somebody, and it goes away. And I was thinking about that in this moment.
I gotta get that book.
Yes, it's a good word. You do. It's Ruby's Worry.
Ruby's Worry. You got it.
So.
Okay.
But I also was thinking about how good I am at that too, and in the financial process when I was going through divorce, how I was terrified of it. Like I managed our finances at our house for the most part, but there was stuff I did not understand. And there was stuff I didn't understand. Like I was just talking about with the car that I needed to be able to be like, have somebody else say, these are the categories you need to focus on. These are the things you need to focus on. And for me, having a financial advisor in that moment really helped squash the stress of it and talk through it. I was still nervous about being able to make it on my own financially after that, but you're right. Having a plan in place is so good. Speaking about plans, I want to talk about a plan specifically for individuals who may be going through a divorce where one of the spouses were working full-time and the other one either had a part-time job or work from home. So maybe their financial load on the household was lower while they were married. I've heard from a lot of people in this scenario, seen it online in different groups I'm at, that it's scary to go from not working, running the household, to getting divorced and having to do that on your own. Could you talk a little bit about what things these individuals would need to keep in mind when they're starting to budget, save, pay for their things in the future, and what financial tips you might have for them?
I come I come back to a piece of paper and a pen and writing everything down. It is scary. And depending on how long you are together, you know, sometimes spousal support or alimony isn't a part of the picture. So if you've been married for a good while, that's subjective, so I'm going to keep it at that. If you've been married for a good while and spousal support's not part of the conversation, red flag. We'll just say that, red flag. But for a lot of people, you know, if the marriage was relatively shorter and there was and spousal support's not part of the picture, then we do really want to know what are the things we need to be covering in terms of bills, of keeping food on the table, in terms of keeping the lights on and keeping a roof over our head. And as scary as it can be, it is about awareness, because for many individuals, when we're stressed out, we can tend to want to say, just purchase extra things, or we can choose to turn a blind eye to things. Oh, that overwhelms me, so I don't want to focus on it. But if you know, oh, well, what I was doing before was bringing in this much and I need twice that to cover the bills, okay, then we know what that shortfall is. Okay, well, maybe I need a second job to cover this much. And when you're first transitioning, you're going to be figuring a lot of things out. So know that some things can change. Change can be scary, but change can also be really good. So I would say keep that awareness. You do want to be careful on how much you're spending on housing versus discretionary spending versus savings, things like that. And that's going to be so different for everybody, depending on what your cost of living is. So I can't give exact dollar amounts or anything like that, but you just want to be conscious of that. You know, if you feel like you're spending a little bit too much in one area, well, either work with a financial advisor to talk through it. You can Google budget forms, you can Google budget guidelines, things like that. And I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the information out there, but just look at where your spending is and see if you're proud of where that spending is, if you feel comfortable with that. If there's anything like, oh, whoa, I spend way too much here. Oh, okay, well, that was your natural inclination to say that about it. Okay, well, let's be really aware then. If you're always writing down your spending and you feel like, gosh, every time I fill up the car with gas, I go in and I get a few snacks or whatever to keep in the car, and it's always 10 to 20 bucks, and I do that 10 times a month. Oh, that can really add up. But why am I doing that? Or whatever it is. And that's where I say, think about your priorities, you know, because that helps dictate some of those spending habits. We want to know what we're doing when we're not thinking about it. And then we also want to know what our base is. What is our base that we're going to have to cover? And how do I make that happen? And how do I hold myself accountable to making that happen? And know that some things that make us a little bit uncomfortable, it's in those times that we grow, right? It's in that, I remember at one point I was like, I really want to do, I want to try martial arts. And I was an adult, didn't have any experience, but it's not innately bad. It's a good thing. It's healthy. It's good for your mind, body, everything. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to try it. It makes me uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it. And it was a great experience, fantastic. And so that same, they say in yoga, like the pose starts when the pose hurts, some things like that. Sometimes it's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable. We can work through that. We can work through it. We can grow through it, be aware, and we can go out there and get it. We can. And you're not alone. You've built a team into place. And if you haven't, that's step one.
Yeah. So step one, put your team into place. Step two, understand your priorities and your cash flow, like we were talking about before. talk with your attorney about the legal aspects of spousal support and how that's working. It's going to depend on what state you're in when you're getting divorced, what the rules are around spousal support. But it could mean if you've been married for quite a long time, you have kids, you could have child support and spousal support potentially. So it's important to talk to your attorney about that. So get all the facts, understand where you're at. Don't let somebody tell you you can't have spousal support. If you talk to your own attorney, make sure that you get what is rightfully yours. All right. So understand all the facts, understand what you have coming in, what's going out, what you need to have. And then third, make a plan for how to fill that gap. And then find spaces where maybe you're spending money that you don't need to be spending money, or that you can switch to an alternative plan or whatever, even if it's just for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And sometimes it's okay to spend money. I'm going to say that too.
Yeah.
If you are scrimping and saving and you're having a hard time paying the bills, yeah, we need to be really conscious of where our spending is. But sometimes it's my job to make sure my clients don't feel bad about spending their money. Like, it's my job for you to do the things that you want to do and not feel bad about it, because we've been responsible. We know what we're doing. We know what our decisions are. If we know what goal we're working towards and we're on track and we have extra and something else is really important, go do it. I will encourage you to go do it. Things like that. So I just want to layer that in too. It's not that if you're going through a divorce, you can't spend it on anything. It's not always the case. Just know where you're at. Know where you're at and let yourself do that. Let yourself establish where you're at. So I'd almost say maybe start with what your priorities are, because that might be more exciting than starting with your cash flow.
Yeah. It's all about the excitement.
Yeah. Set some goals in place.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about budgeting and finance, and we're not taught this in school. And so I know personally for me that it was terrifying going through this process and understanding where to spend money when I've run my own business for 7 years before I got divorced. And so I still was not understanding how exactly to save enough money for taxes. Well, what part of my business would I need to share with my spouse, if any, what that income all looks like, how all of that structure works. It's confusing and stressful. And so I'm like, talk to a financial advisor. But I'm also just thinking now about budgeting and spending money. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the budget of what are some of the main things we should keep in mind as we're getting divorced. So your priorities are, maybe the basics. You have the basic things, right? Like your house, food. What other categories would you say are basics that we need to make sure that we're paying for, that you would say, of course, you need to have this money in the...
First, I would split it between fixed and variable.
Okay.
So what do you have control over what those numbers are going to, I can't just cut back. I mean, I guess I can turn lights off more, but like utilities are going to be pretty flat. They're going to be, if you have rent or a mortgage, what those dollar amounts are. You can't really change that. And then there are going to be some variable numbers that come down to groceries, entertainment. Fuel can kind of go either way for your car, that I'm going to leave that for you to define if it's extra driving versus pretty fixed for work or something like that. So I would first separate, even if I did nothing but sat at home and meditated all day, what bills would I still have? What expenses would I still have versus what are some of those numbers that can change? And the more we can anticipate, the better. If you have, let's say post separation or post divorce, you're living alone for the first time or whatever it is, as soon as you're able to get on a fixed payment plan for your utilities or something like that, that can be really helpful. So what that monthly cost is going to be instead of it being all over the place. But then, having a separate line item to say, what do I have some discretion over? That if I was really tight, where could I pull back? Am I already spending the bare minimum on my groceries, or do I really just get whatever I want?
Right.
And how much am I spending on entertainment and going out? And could I pull that back if I needed to? To just know those. And they're not even saying you have to stop doing them, but to know what those are. Because if you are looking at this going, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a one income household. What do I know? These bills have to be paid. Okay. And then this, I could probably squeeze them down to this, and know it's okay to not be able to write all of that down in one sitting. That's what I mean. Sometimes it takes going to the grocery store a few times, you know, it might take you a month or whatever to start saying, oh, well, that's about what it is every week. Because it's okay if you don't know right now. That's okay. We're figuring it out as we go sometime. So those are the biggest categories, fixed and variable. And then the variable I would break out between necessary and discretionary. Okay.
So like groceries could be variable, but they're necessary. My Netflix account is not fixed. It's not something I have to pay for. It's not necessary, but I could and need it to keep it on my entertainment budget because now I'm home alone for a long time.
Right.
My kids are gone, right?
You know, but the Beyonce concert, all of those other, I don't know. Just, I guess that's it. How much scrimping and saving? If you have one rough month, are you going to go in and cancel 4 subscription services? Maybe not. I don't know. But to just see it, to say, oh, if I want to spend how I spend without thinking about it, here's what I need.
Okay, exactly. Would you say that you are able to say to somebody that a certain percentage of savings that they should have in their fixed side? So if you're just starting, you have no savings account, or maybe you got like $500 in your savings account after the divorce because you didn't save when you were married, what would you say should be an important number in that savings account?
So if we're talking emergency fund?
Emergency fund, day-to-day savings. So of course you have saving goals for if you're like going to buy a house or whatever, but day-to-day emergency fund, what should you be saving for?
Day-to-day, I would say 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses, which you now know because you've done the whole cash flow breakdown.
Right. Okay.
And that's where you think about, you know, if you did have an emergency, are you going to cancel Netflix? Or probably not, you know, whatever it is, and think, okay, if we're just going to use easy math numbers, if my spending is $5,000 a month, I should have $15,000 to $30,000 in my savings. And I'm saying bare minimum, you know, if you're spending left and right and it's $5,000, but you easily could cut back to 3. Okay, well, use 3 as your number. And then, and then say 6 to. So that being said, 3 to 6 months, that's a pretty wide range, right?
Right.
So I would, for that, you used an example, let's say someone has $500 or less in their emergency fund. I say start one step at a time, try to get to 1,000. Look at your spending, look at your income, and say, okay, I'm going to try to get to 1,000, and how fast can I get there? You know, try to get there as fast as you can. And then your next step, try to get to 5,000. You're noticing it have even numbers. I use even personally in my practice. I use even numbers for myself and with clients, because with an emergency fund, we need our brains to be able to easily cancel them out as if they don't exist. So if your emergency fund goal is 10,000 and you have 10,500, it's really easy to look at it and go, oh, I've got $500 extra.
Right.
But if your emergency goal is 9,750 and you've got 10,500, and you know,
right.
It's just harder to do the math, and we have to, it doesn't exist, except when an emergency happens, it totally exists. And we know how much is in there. So then that 3 to 6 months, if you start with 3, of course, always start with 3. If you have variable sources of income, maybe you can err closer to 3. If you have one salary job, maybe try to pump it up a little bit, get closer to 6, because if you did lose your job, you lose all of your sources of income.
Right.
That makes sense. But if you've got a few side gigs that you do, plus your job, okay, maybe you can be 3 to 4. And I say, try to start with an even number, because it gives you something to work for, and it gives you something that your brain can easily cancel out.
Yeah. I like your basic mantra here of start with even numbers, keep it going. See the money get in there. It seems more attainable, even though it seems like there's no way I can save $1,000 in the next month or 2 months. Like, it does seem attainable to be like, I can do this little by little, step by step. You're better off tomorrow than you were yesterday. That kind of thing.
And give yourself a measurable amount you're trying to, look at your cash flow and say, okay, on paper, I should be able to save this amount of money.
Yeah. So
I'm going to try to do that. And then track it for a few months.
Mm-hmm.
So then, if you're not, oh, well, where's it going? Don't beat yourself up about it, but acknowledge it, look at it.
Right.
Say, how do you feel about that? If you're like, well, my cat had an emergency vet appointment and that's where it went. Well, yeah, that's going to happen. It's an emergency. But if it was like, oh, well, I did all
these many clothes at
things.
Goodwill this week.
Yeah.
Right.
Then we say, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm aware of it. And so when we come to next month and you're walking into the Goodwill going, wait a second.
Yeah.
This threw me off track last month. Okay. I'm going to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And start there.
One of the budget things.
Then you know the tangible number you were saving.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get it, then you say, oh my gosh, I did it. I got my goal.
Yeah.
And then you say, now what?
You're definitely driven by goals. You're so excited about reaching your goal.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
And you want to find out what's important to you for those goals, because sometimes an emergency fund that feels less exciting. Or retirement. I would say for some people, a retirement goal is not all that exciting. But if being financially independent, being able to travel, or being able to whatever it is that really gets you going, that's what we focus on. Right. So now we're going to take that emergency fund goal that you were saving and put it towards this other goal, because you really care about it. And it doesn't mean you're just throwing your money away and you're never going to see it again. You're saying, oh no, when I do that, that means one day I'm not going to have to work for a paycheck. And it might mean for the first 10 years of, if you can't tell, I love travel. So I usually use that example. Or maybe you're like, I love classic cars, and I really would love to have a classic car hobby in retirement. We say, okay, well, if we increase your savings into this goal by this much, you can make that happen. Then it's like, oh, instead of going, oh, I'm just paying more for future me, you're like, no, you're buying your classic car hobby.
Yeah, that's good. Reframe the goals for yourself. I'm just thinking about my goals as I go to, like, for my emergency fund, it's more important for me to be less stressed if something big happened, like thinking about, it's not an emergency, but I know that thinking about my future self, my car breaks down, I need to put $3,000 in it. Me being able to just take that money on my savings account feels like a lifting off my chest, versus being like emergency fund for whatever could happen, or be like refrigerator broke down. Just being able to buy a new refrigerator also feels good. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I like that reframe. I like that.
Yeah. And if you don't have it yet, because emergency fund goals, you're like, whatever, I'm never going to get there. Well, let's break it down. Let's get this first goal, then this second goal. But say, okay, picture yourself, right? If you don't have that yet, picture you're driving down the highway and your tires blow, and it's, $900 to get new tires. Like that ever happens. It's always an example. Whatever.
Yeah.
Your tires blow and you need new tires. If you don't have the money, that is stressful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So stressful. But if you have it, it doesn't feel good to dip into it. It doesn't feel good to have to spend money you weren't planning on spending.
Yeah.
But holy cow, is that a different scenario if you cover it and then you have to work to refill it, versus having to finance it and pay 20% interest on it.
Right.
You're digging out of a hole.
Ooh, digging out of a hole makes me, I feel like my financial goals are set by this like stress I'm getting in my chest right now. We're talking about it. Where's your stress right now as we're talking about this, people? That's what the part of your body you should think about. You're just reframing your goals. Okay. But having money for tires. Okay. That feels good.
Exactly.
All right. So about your budget, look what your fixed costs are, look at your variable costs, think about 3 to 6 months potentially for an emergency savings, reframe that if you need to, what you're, how you set that up, start with what's attainable and work towards that actual 3 to 6 months. I also liked your idea that depending on what your job is, if you have a full-time salary job, remember that you should probably have more in the bank if you lose your job versus me. Like I have contracts working with home sellers, that sort of thing. I have different spots that if I lost one, I could fill it with other. So it might not be important to have all 6 months worth. Mm-hmm. Right. I think I'm saying everything you said back to you.
You're doing great, Taryn.
All right. Awesome. I'm listening. My chest feels lighter already. All right. I want to talk a little bit about some of the nitty-gritty stuff that are these big things that I think many of us don't really think about in day-to-day life, but others are better at saving for retirement than I am. So that's one of them that I'd like to talk about. But I want to ask you about what options do individuals have for managing their retirement accounts during their divorce? So a little bit more specific. I have to divide my retirement, any money that I've put in it during the time of my marriage. What are my options for doing that?
Yeah. Excellent question. It comes down to buckets as well. So just keep in mind, you said right now, repeating, you said, I'm probably going to have to divide my retirement. That may or may not be the case. So I want to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay.
For everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But because if you have two individuals and they both have accounts with the same amount in it, the agreement might be to just each keep their own.
Okay. Yep. So that's one option. You could end up keeping what you have in your own retirement account. Okay.
Mm-hmm. If you have any inkling that your savings, whether that's in a work plan, your investments, like a 401k, 403b, IRA, Roth IRA, anything like that. If you have any inkling that that's complicated at all, or there are any significant dollars in it, any accounts, or any significant differences, talk to a professional about it.
Yeah.
To get some guidance on that. Mm-hmm. And to help determine what's an equitable division of assets.
Okay. And then okay. And then you did mention, and I know this from my own divorce, that there is some legality specifically around retirement that if you do end up having to divide accounts or share accounts in different ways, that you should do that through your divorce because it could save you tax money and you can get it done at that time. Is that right?
Yes. So if you said nitty gritty, so we're going to go for it.
Yes, please bring it.
If you take money out of an IRA before age 59 and a half, you're going to pay a penalty for it. So if you just say, oh, I'm going to pull $50,000 out of my account and put it in your bank account and boom, our assets are divided. Mm-hmm. Well, when you go to file taxes, if that was a traditional IRA that you pulled the money, like it was pre-tax, you never pay taxes on those dollars. Yeah. That other person just walked away with $50K cash. And when you go to file taxes, you're going to have another $50K of income you pay taxes on, and you're going to pay a 10% penalty. Mm-hmm. Subject to whatever taxes are. Tax law is when this podcast you're listening to.
Right.
But you're going to pay a penalty, you're going to pay income tax, things like, so that's where I say every dollar's not equal. You want to be aware of that. That's why if you don't feel confident in what those buckets are, bring in a professional, because it can really be detrimental.
Mm-hmm,
and then if the divorce is finalized and you're filing taxes, then it's way too late. At that point, you wouldn't want to do that. So you want to be really conscious of taking money out of an IRA or any type of retirement account like a 401k. With a 401k, a retirement plan through an employer plan, you do get one, if that account, you need a legal document called a qualified domestic relations order that lays out tells the plan how to divide the assets. So let's say there's one plan, you have the special tax documents that tells them how to divide it. And now you have, former partner in your account. And that document told them how to divide it. And if this is in a retirement work plan, you get one chance to take some money out without paying a penalty. But you do still pay income tax on it if it was pre-tax. So that's if you're ever thinking, oh, but when I'm getting a divorce, I can take it all out without a penalty. I can just take I take $200,000 out. And you're like, oh my gosh, but if you take $200,000 out of a pre-tax account, you're now at a minimum in the $200,000 tax bracket. You're still
right. Yeah.
So it's little things like that you want to be really careful with.
It seems like the moral of the story for retirements, investment accounts, any of those letters and numbers that you just mentioned, is to talk to a financial advisor or your attorney about it, or both, because there could be tax implications based on where you live. There's federal tax implications based on the time that you're listening to this podcast, the time you're getting divorced. So specifically talk to an expert about those, whether you use that expert for your divorce or not, pay for a financial advisor or whatever. Those specifically are important to make sure you understand all of the tax implications. I would say probably another type of asset that is your house or any type of commercial buildings you own, or other assets, other property that you own outside of your home. That would be another one that I would specifically talk to an expert about. Is there other big categories like that you think are taxes? Okay.
Tax professional. And I do want to, so we said, build out your team, have a team, you're not alone. I want to remind folks that you don't have to keep working with who you've always worked with. So in our business, it's not always the case, but a lot of times we're working with the non-money person in the relationship, right? I don't know any of these budget numbers. I don't know what the cash, that's fine. We're going to go through it. So we're often working with those individuals. And so at that point, you don't always know, or those clients, but until the attorney makes the connection or something like that, you don't have to keep working with who you're working with. That's if you are working with someone that never gave you the time of day, that never asked you how you feel, or maybe just communicated in a way that made sense to your partner, but never made sense to you, you don't have to keep working with them. You can say, I want to work with someone that I understand what they're saying. If all you hear is jargon, it doesn't make them a bad advisor, a bad professional in their field. It just means their communication style didn't really jive with yours. Yeah. It's okay. So find those people that you say, oh, I get it. I feel comfortable asking you questions. I understand your response. And I feel like I can talk to you about what's important to me. You might understand someone, but if you don't feel comfortable saying, I know it may not look like a good financial choice, but I want to stay in the house or something. You want to be able to talk to people about those things that will at least hear you and say, well, let's see what we can do. If it's not feasible, at least we tried, or something, whatever it is. So I want you to know, when you're building out that team, you get to choose that team. And if you try meeting with someone and they weren't the right fit, it's okay to go and try to find someone else new again.
Yeah. That's really good advice, because the divorce, you should be a little bit selfish and take the time, because it also,
a lot of it.
You get a lot of it selfish. Okay. And you get to have a team that works for you, because really, I was just thinking as you're saying that, if I didn't spend time in my divorce talking to my tax attorney and my financial advisor and my attorney, my legal attorney, my tax accountant, financial advisor and my attorney, I could have, I spent $250 talking to my, attorney, but I also then spent $400 on getting my taxes done. And when I spent that $400, I saved myself a ton of money, because she was able to figure out the way that my parenting time works versus how I put that in my taxes, and all these things I wouldn't even thought of. That $400 was so worth it in the moment, that it feels like a lot ahead of time, but that could be worth it if you have somebody that you trust, can ask the right questions to, that can help you through this time. So you're not missing holes or losing money or forgetting things that you need to have in there, because you don't know, because a lot of times you just don't know when you're a lay person like me.
You don't, and you can even ask your other, if you have one person on your team, if you say, oh, I have a family law attorney, I have a divorce attorney, you can ask them, hey, I want to be building in my team. Do you know any fill in the blank? Do you know any financial advisors? Or who else should I be talking to?
Yeah.
Or, maybe you have a tax person that you've been working with. Hey, I'm going through this. Who should I talk to? And you can get some guidance that way. I know on the financial advising side, we're like the hub of relationships, right?
Yeah.
I'm no tax professional. I know enough to be very dangerous, but I do not claim to be, and I do not give tax advice.
Yeah.
But I know enough to say, oh, you got a lot going on. You should have, and you're filing your own taxes. Ooh, how do you know? Let's bring someone in.
Yeah.
Or go find someone if you have someone that you want to, whatever it is. So don't be afraid to ask, hey, who should I have on my team?
Yeah, let's think, you can help me figure out who could be possible team members. So we already talked of a few: financial advisor.
I'm actually part of a divorce resource group.
Oh, yes. Yes, I need to have them all on my table. Okay, so we need a financial advisor.
Tax professional.
Yep.
You probably want to have a real estate professional on hand, unless you live in a city where you're only rent. But yeah, I don't know. Even then, I think you still
might. Yeah, and if you don't, you need to have probably a lender, a mortgage loan person alongside your realtor, because your realtor does not have that advice.
Absolutely, okay. Yeah, a mortgage lender. If you really are struggling with cash flow, maybe like a budget coach, or something like that someone does work specifically with cash flow. Or if you are working on credit repair, sometimes you to be able to partner with a credit repair specialist, and friends and family.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about I buy my own health insurance, or I did for a long time. There's people actually that are health insurance professionals too that could do that for you. That's another important one. Medical advocates,
attorneys, legal, family law. If you're not doing a contested divorce, like you said, it can be really expensive. You can do an uncontested divorce and use a mediator. Maybe you don't want to each get your own attorney and do all that, but get a mediator, go through mediation together. You have options.
A therapist.
Yeah. Maybe a gym membership or just some walking shoes.
Okay, these are all the options for teams. Take it or leave it. No, but there is all these different parts in life that, I feel like I'd always be like, I have to know everything. I have to know everything because I'm an adult. I need to know how to run my finances. I need to know how all the legal aspects of my business and how to run my life. And how to do my own taxes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting exhausted. That feeling on my chest is coming back again. But having a team member and having somebody to go to talk to about it really, really lifts that, and can often, even though, like we were saying before, it might cost some money up front, could save you a lot of time and stress in the future. It's important. It's why
we live in a world that you don't have to know everything. You just have to be able to find it. Why would you know all that? It's like nobody would. Why? You're right. They don't teach it in schools. There isn't just this. Oh, here's what you need. Oh, hey Google, here's exactly my scenario and what's going on. Tell me what I need.
Yeah, and there's a reason why certifications exist, right? There's a reason why there's a certified public accountant, because there's a lot of information that you need. And you said, what's the certification that you said you have? Certified
divorce financial analyst.
Okay, so there's enough information and enough loopholes and enough options that there's a certification that is created, not for no reason, not just because it's complicated. Somebody needs to know how to do it.
Exactly.
Okay. There's been so many good gems in here. But before I wrap up, I really want to know and ask everybody, what do you think is the most important thing that our listeners need to keep in mind as they're going through their divorce? And rebuilding their new life?
I say to give yourself space, a safe space, and be patient. It's a lot of hurry up and wait. It's a lot of, like you said, pressure in your chest. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of unknowns, and that's okay. So I say slow it down. And if you need to talk it out, you need to reach out to your counselor, you need to reach out to a team member, do it, and give yourself grace, because it is the things that make us uncomfortable that help us grow. So that working through it is better than not. And specifically in finance, it, like you said with your car, these little things keep coming through. And so even the day that you have your decree in hand, your judgment in hand, unfortunately on the finance side, it's not done.
Yeah.
That's the start of it. Okay, now that this is in place, then we can divide things, and it can take time, and that's okay. And that's okay.
Take the time, give yourself grace. I like that. I like that.
Space and grace.
Yes, I love it. So if our listeners are looking for more information about some of the stuff you talked about, or maybe want to reach out to you or find you online, where should they look? So
you can, I do have a website through Edward Jones. So it's just edwardjones.com/Rachel-Kieras. That's RACHEL -KIERA as in apple, S as in Sam. I do have a Facebook page, not the best way to reach out to me, but I do have one, which is Edward Jones, financial advisor, Rachel Kieras. But I would say if you go to that Edward Jones website, you can send me a message. If you send a message through that, it goes right, I get that right to my email, which you could also email me, which is just rachel.kieras@edwardjones.com. Okay, awesome. And I'll make sure those are in the show notes and on the webpage if people want to reach out. Sounds great. All right. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing all these nuggets of wisdom about our finances and de-stressing it and helping us get through it. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you too, Tara.